And you still have a positive view of Michael?
I do. But
you don't believe the stories?
No.
That there have been many occurrences in my life and in my relationship to Michael that have created a question of doubt.
All they cared about was trying to find something on Michael Jackson.
Who you said, by the way, did not abuse you.
Who Michael was innocent.
He showed you pornography. He showed you images of genitalia with sexual diseases. What was he doing? Was he grooming you?
I was the first and the only celebrity at the time in 1993 to come out and say absolutely not. Absolutely not. He never touched me. He never touched anybody, as far as I know.
It started with, I had an obsession that I wanted to be Michael Jackson. And it was kind of one of those things that, you know, as a kid, you know, you sit there and you look at a teen magazine or whatever, and you go, you know, one day I'm going to meet that guy. But I really believed it. Then when I knew that I was going to be doing Goonies, I just done Gremlins with Spielberg, and I was supposed to do E.T., and it didn't end up working out for one reason or another. And so when we ended up getting the Goonies, I felt pretty comfortable with him already because we had like a relationship at that point. So the first day that I saw him in that story, I put the dots together like, oh wait, Michael did something on E.T. and they're friends and I always see them together, so 6 Degrees of Michael, right? So I went to Steve and I was like, hey, could you please, I know, you know, the Jackson Victory Tour is coming up. I know you're friends with Michael. Is there any way you could get us tickets to the show? And we had tickets for the show, then the show got canceled, then they rescheduled the show, and we weren't sure if we were going to get tickets, and then one day, it comes to the trailer, and it's got 7 or 8 satin Jackson Victory Tour jackets, and it's addressed to all the Goonies.
And it was the 1984 Victory Tour jacket. It had the eagle on the back, it said Michael on the front, and 84 on the side.
We opened up the box, and we were like, wow, look at that. He's actually doing it. Wow. So then we got the tickets, we went to the show, and then he eventually came to the set. We were all friends.
Well, he had a magic, man, that's for sure. There was an energy. When he walked into the room, you didn't even have to look. You just knew that he was there. You could feel his presence.
I said, how long are you staying? He said, I don't know, maybe an hour or so. Can't stay long. And I said, well, listen, I really want to talk to you. And do you think that if I gave you my phone number, you would call me? And he goes, sure, I'll call you.
I knew right away that this was something that I needed to make happen. I don't know why. I don't know what the great importance of it was at that time. But everything happens on God's earth for a reason. I believe that wholeheartedly. When I was a kid, Michael and I became regular friends. So Michael and I were, you know, visiting one day, and I wanted to do something. I was bored, and like one thing that popped into my head was like, let's go to Disneyland. And he's like, well, you know, I don't have my security tonight. So we go into his closet. He's got this whole array of costumes. He grabbed an afro and a mustache, and I grabbed a fake mustache and this FBI hat that he had, and you know, put my hair in a ponytail and these big aviator glasses. And we drove to Disneyland. And when we got there, we realized that these fans had tailed us all the way from his apartment in Westwood to Disneyland. And when we pull into the parking lot, the fans jump out of their cars. They come running up to us and they're like, aren't you Michael and Corey? And we're like, yeah, that's us. Can we take some pictures? Michael, can we have some autographs? They didn't ask me for my autograph. They wanted Michael. Signed the autographs. We took the pictures. And that was it. We went around and went about our merry day. And we, you know, spent a few hours just kind of walking around the park. And then we ended up staying at the Disneyland Hotel. Michael had black card, and it said Michael Jackson, Disneyland. And with that black Disneyland card, he could get anything he wanted. So we showed up at the Disneyland Hotel, and they were like, we're sold out. I'm sorry, there's nothing. And he's this dude with an afro, and I said, you know, he's like, but we need a room. And he's like, they're like, sorry, we're sold out. You know, he's like, you know, he gives them the black Michael Jackson credit, and they're like, oh, we'll be right. And they come back like 5 minutes later, like, we don't have like what you're, you know, we don't have like a Michael Jackson, you know, type room, but we've got a regular room. I mean, if that's all right. And he's like, you got a cot? Here he is, the biggest superstar of the world. Here I am, a film actor, you know, and he is willing to accept a cot and let me have the bed. A total gentleman, more so than I would even, you know what I mean? Like, I'd be like, sorry, kid, get the cot, you know, I'm Michael Jackson. But no, he was like, you sleep in the bed, I'll take the cot, we're cool. Can I tell you how much fun it was when we'd be on the big pirate ship ride at Neverland? And we're like sitting out there and there's nobody there and he's like, ho! And I'm like, who are you hoeing to, man? There ain't nobody here. We would get on those bumper cars. He had those bumper cars, right? And he's playing his music. He's playing Black or White. He gets out of the bumper car and literally leaps from the car into the middle center thing, which is like an island, and starts dancing.
You know how much money I'd pay to see
Smoke,
that?
there's like smoke and lights. It's like my own private concert inside his bumper car tent. Now those are the moments. Michael had a movie theater at Neverland where when you would go up there for a visit, generally the visits would be 3 days. That was a general period of stay. So during that 3 days, you know, you'd have certain dinners and lunches, and you know, you had the chefs that would prepare everything for you. And you know, obviously there was a big arcade. There was lots to do on the property. A big zoo, you had giraffes, you had elephants. But the movie theater. And on that trip, we ordered Dream a Little Dream so that Michael could see it on the big screen with us for the first time.
And what was Michael's reaction
He
to
loved
that?
it. He loved it.
And how did you
He thought it was a
feel?
great tribute. You know, the dance scene specifically. He took it as a great tribute.
You know, yes, he was very influential. I mean, I got to be in the studio with him. I got to watch him dancing and rehearsing and on the set of his videos. I was on the sets of The Way You Make Me Feel, Smooth Criminal, Liberian Girl. I was in Liberian Girl. You know, so I mean, I got to be around it all the time. I got to watch him rehearsing. I got to go to his tour rehearsals. He wanted to walk my song, What's Up With the Youth, into CBS Records and give me a #1 hit.
And he says, Corey, that's a #1 song. That song literally can go to #1. And if you let me, I will walk it into Tommy Mottola at CBS Records right now, and I will make that song #1. And I was like, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that. But no, I'm good. One, I was a real friend to him, and I didn't want him to think that I was just another leech sucking off of his teeth to try to get something. And my other part of it was, if I'm going to be a success in the music industry, I have to earn it. I have to earn it the hard way. I have to, you know, play the crappy clubs. I have to get paid $150 for a gig and sweat it out and have beer bottles thrown at me and all the stuff that I had to go through for decades, way longer than most artists, I'm sure, but, you know, for decades. I literally went through this, taking the bottom of the barrel and toughing it out and proving to people that I was serious about my art. I didn't want to be Michael Jackson's protege, even though sometimes people kind of treat me that way anyway. But imagine if I did that, then that's all it would be.
Well, me and Michael are friends, but he didn't help me. Just all the stuff I do is on my own.
But it looks so much like him when you're dancing.
Well,
all these little moves you make. It's just like Michael Jackson.
Well, I suppose that's a good compliment.
He must be a good influence on you then.
Yes, he is. He's a good influence.
Now you're in a box. You're Michael Jackson 2, or, you know, Mini Michael, or White Michael, or whatever way you want to frame it. But that would have been it. That would have been it. And that's very limiting. And I was like, you know what? No, I think I got to be known as my own entity.
I found something, which I now have in my possession, from 30 years ago. And what it was is an audio cassette of Michael and I in the back of a limo for 40 minutes just talking about whatever. Listen, right between Thriller and Bad, and me between Stand By Me and Lost Boys. Well, he was the big brother I never had, quite honestly. He was everything to me as a kid. He taught me so many things. He's taught me about loving animals, vegetarianism, animal rights, environmental issues, caring about your fans, how to treat your fans, the fact that the moment that you meet your fans may just be a fleeting moment to you and something that you're in the middle of things and you got to take time for, but to them, they're going to remember this moment for the rest of their life. So how important it is with that exchange and how you treat them. Michael understood all my pain because he was going through the same thing. Be driving in the car, specifically one time when we were coming back from Disneyland, and I looked in the mirror and I had zits all over my face and I was like, oh, I'm so ugly. He said, don't ever say that you're ugly. And I said, but I am. I look terrible. It's disgusting.
And he said, "You're not disgusting. Don't ever say that about yourself." I had a very cruel childhood. It was very cruel. And it seemed wherever I was always hell. We discussed everything, you know what I mean? It was literally like a big brother, little brother relationship where we talked about everything. I would talk about the abuse that I endured at school, which is also in the book, the abuse with my parents, and also the difficulties of having to go to work every day instead of being able to play. You know, both of us shared that similarity. We were robbed of our childhoods. We weren't able to just have sleepovers or go play at the arcade with other kids or take your bike down the street and do what you want. That didn't exist for us. That wasn't a reality. So instead we had to, you know, go from meeting to meeting and you know, sit in a room full of people all day and be judged and have people question you about everything that you do. Again, life under the microscope, totally different, a very different perspective than most people ever have the experience of having.
Everybody knows Michael's dancing, and everybody knows Michael's persona, what he put out there, what he portrayed to the world. But what a lot of people don't know is Michael as a person. And the reason why a lot of people don't know that is because he didn't want them to.
When you come from a broken home, when you need somebody to look up to, a big brother, something of that nature, which I very badly needed, Michael became all of that for me. He would listen to my problems. He would ask me about my problems. He would talk to me about my problems.
And he liked to do things behind closed doors. He liked to have a personal, private life. And the reason for that is because when your life is out there all the time, when you're constantly under a microscope, and you're constantly exposed for the whole world to see, you have to keep some things personal.
That's the part people don't really realize about Michael, is that he was just a regular guy. At the end of the day, he put his shoes on one foot at a time, just like everybody else.
Did Michael Jackson save your life?
In many ways, yeah. Many ways. I mean, he certainly saved my soul, because I probably would have been a very, very dark, dismal, reclusive, ugly person if I had no love. But that said, Michael, when he was with me, made me feel like I was the only one that mattered. And that was a big brother that I never had.
Well, I've been a victim of molestation.
So you know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
You feel guilty, you feel horrible.
I feel like it was your fault.
Believe me, the person who molested me, if this was him, you know, that did that to me, then this would be a different story, because I would be out there up front, you know, doing something immediately to have this man given the what was due to him.
In fact, if anybody wants to go back to 1993, when I was interviewed by the Santa Barbara Police Department, I sat there and I gave them the names. They're on record. They have all of this information, but they were scanning Michael Jackson. All they cared about was trying to find something on Michael Jackson.
Who you said, by the way, did not abuse you.
Who Michael was innocent, and that was what the interview was about with the police in 1993. I told them he is not that guy, and they said, well, maybe you just don't understand your friend. And I said, no, I know the difference between pedophiles and somebody who's not a pedophile, because I've been molested. Here's the names. Go investigate.
But the information that we got was that John, is it Grissom, was your assistant, and that when Michael started paying a lot of attention to you and you started spending time with Michael, that he got angry and jealous, basically, because you were hanging out with Michael and not with him. Did I hit a source fire?
First of all, I knew Michael long before I knew John Grissom. And John Grissom was the guy who molested me. So, I don't know where he got the facts from, but, I mean, they're kind of messed up, but John Grissom, you know, was the guy who molested me, and I'm sure he probably was jealous of how much I respected Michael and how much I hung around Michael. And if in fact he may have thought anything was going on with Michael, I could imagine how a sick person like that would think, and would think that, you know, nothing ever happened with Michael.
You are listening to an interview between actor Corey Feldman and Santa Barbara Sheriff, obtained exclusively by Celebrity Justice, recorded in December 1993. In it, Corey states not once, but numerous times, his friend Michael Jackson, who he hung out with, didn't do anything improper with him.
If there was something that I'd been hiding for all these years, then I would want nothing more than to bring it out right now to make sure that Michael got the help that he needed.
The concern to me about it is that if there is something, if something did happen that you're not telling us, is that you wouldn't because of that.
No, I can't put myself in the position of thinking, would I or wouldn't I, because nothing happened.
But Corey repeatedly insists to the skeptical cops nothing happened. Not then, and not the time he slept over at Jackson's Encino home.
We stayed up all night, we talked, and we did stuff. We prayed together before we went to sleep. And he was wearing pajamas, and I was wearing my pajamas.
And, says Corey,
So we took it to TV, we talked, nothing happened.
What was it when?
Yeah, I think he had an extra pair of songs that he sang.
but Sergeant Linden doesn't seem to buy Corey's story.
It was a little funny when I asked about his jacuzzi.
I did?
Yeah.
Corey again insists.
He never did anything out of one. I mean, anything. You know? I mean, the closest he ever came to touching me was like maybe slapping me on the leg once, you know, to talk about that I'd lost weight.
Your relationship with Michael Jackson was clearly a very important one to you. It had its ups and downs. You fell out with him briefly, and he was a mentor in other moments.
In actuality, the story's in the book. There was a very definite point where we ended our friendship. And the ending of that friendship came more from me than it did from him.
Why, Corey?
Well, because he said some very unsettling things to me. And he questioned the integrity of our relationship.
Michael had some paranoid delusion that I had some ill-fated intentions to write some sort of book about him, which was categorically untrue. And what happened next was basically the way I perceived it, is that he threatened my life.
The next day, Jackson shunned him. Feldman later released a song expressing his anger for being dumped by his famous friend.
Now, my entire life has been based on the fact that I am a man of integrity. That I am a man who, no matter what, when I'm dead and gone, I want people to say that man never told lies. That man was honest. He was a man of his word. If he said it, it's true. Period. Whether it's I make plans with somebody, I give my word to somebody, whatever the arrangement is, if I put my name on it, if I put my word on it, I deliver that as being factual. Period.
You don't understand the toll that it takes having to be friends with somebody like Michael Jackson, because you spend your whole life defending this friend. No, he's not gay. No, he's not a weirdo. I started looking at each piece of information, and with that came this sickening realization that there have been many occurrences in my life and in my relationship to Michael that have created a question of doubt. Michael Jackson never touched me. He never harmed me, and he never harmed any children in front of me. When Michael and I would talk about him sleeping over at my house, I'd say, "Do you have any books at your house?" "Well, what do you mean? What kind of books?" He'd say, "Well, you know, Playboy, Penthouse, that sort of thing. As long as there's books there, then I'll come sleep over." Now you can take that for what it's worth.
That doesn't prove anything.
Right.
That doesn't prove that Michael Jackson's a paedophile.
No.
That doesn't prove that he's molested anybody.
Right.
So why does it disturb you now?
Because when I look at the pieces of evidence, and I see that one of the pieces of evidence is Michael Jackson looking at pornographic material with a child, and the child is 13 or 14 years old, and the fact that I witnessed that exact occurrence in my own life, at the same age has to give me reason to pause and say, if this happened with me and the kid's saying it happened with him, then this can't be all made up and it can't all be lies, because at least that one little thing right there I know is completely accurate.
You were given attention?
I was given attention.
He found out that you didn't have a happy relationship at home?
True.
He took you to Disneyland and said you could buy anything you want?
True.
He showed you pornography? He showed you images of genitalia with sexual diseases? What was he doing? Was he grooming you?
I'd like to think not.
Is it possible that that was what he was doing?
Of course it's possible.
Is it possible that Michael Jackson is in fact a predatory paedophile?
It is possible.
How are you coping with the loss of your friend?
Well, I've had a lot of loss in the last year, so it's not just about that. I lost 2 brothers this year. I lost my grandfather this year. I got divorced this year. So, when I came to New York to see Michael for the 30th anniversary, which was at Madison Square Garden, that ended up being the last time I saw Michael. And part of the reason I felt I needed to be here is because the family had called me and said, we want you to come and do an intervention with him. He's got all this stuff with the pain meds and the prescribed medications, as is now very much public record. But at the time it wasn't, and it was a big secret. And they asked me to come down here and participate in an intervention with him. So that's what I was there doing. And then we had our falling out. From that time, we never spoke again.
Were you high around Michael Jackson?
No, never. I mean, I may have smoked weed a couple times. I don't know, but that would have been the most of it.
What was the man like? Did he smoke weed?
Hell no. Are you
Come on, he
kidding me?
smoked a little bit of weed.
Not even a little bit, dude.
Come on, I heard
Not even
rumors.
a touch. He was as straight-laced as they came. He didn't swear. You didn't talk about sex around him. You didn't talk about anything. No dirty language. When I got arrested, I was afraid, to be honest with you, that he'd never talk to me again, because he had such a clean image that I really expected he'd just be like, see ya. And that really showed me the value of what type of person he was. The fact that when I did get arrested, even though his image was still squeaky clean, and by all rights, he could have stepped aside and moved me back. But he didn't. He called me. I got that message on my answering machine, which said, hey, Corey, it's Michael. Is everything okay? Call me if you need me. He was a friend.
No, he was very concerned, and he was trying to get a hold of me for a long time, and, it's hard to reach him. He's like the president, And we finally got in contact, and he really just wanted to hear that I was okay, because I said, do you want to talk about what's going on? He said, no, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to make sure that you're doing okay. I wanted to hear your voice.
Now, I didn't know that he was already kind of starting his own, descent into addiction, but we did later talk about that too. After I got sober, I had to go into the hospital at one point. I was on medicine, and he called me in the hospital to see if I was all right. And he said, what do they have you on? Do you like it? And I thought that was an odd question. So I knew that he was enjoying those medications a little bit too much. And I already had the sober training at that point to be able to try and work with him. I met Conrad Murray here in New York at Madison Square Garden all those years ago. He handed me a business card and he said he was Michael's doctor. Michael's got a doctor that's kind of like Elvis's doctor that follows him around with a bag of tricks.
Right.
I'd been told that by people. And he gave me his business card that night. He said, I'm Michael's doctor. Give me a call if you need anything. So, I know that he'd been in the picture a lot longer than has been depicted in the press. And to me, it's quite unfortunate that they left him alone in a room with this crazy guy.
So you think he's responsible in some way?
I think he's absolutely responsible. He's the one that pulled the trigger. I mean, let's face it, Nobody has said Michael pulled the trigger himself. So it's your responsibility to make sure that that doesn't happen. Whether it was intentional, whether it was Michael's wishes, whether it was not Michael's wishes. We don't really know. All I know is it seems to me there's a big pink elephant in the room. At the end of the day, whether it was done intentionally, whether he was paid by Michael or by someone else to do it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it was a suicide, doesn't matter whether it was an assassination, doesn't matter whether it was an accident. At the end of the day, he pulled the trigger. So he is responsible. Michael did a movie and a concert, supposedly a concert, called This Is It. To me, that was a very public message. Okay? This is it. This is my final appearance. You know, there's a final curtain call in front of a big red curtain. I don't think there needs to be a much bigger broadcast of saying, peace out. But nobody seems to have put that together yet. So again, it doesn't matter if that's the truth or not. That's my theory, but who knows if I'm right. All I do know for sure is that whether it was Michael's wishes, whether it wasn't his wishes, whether it was intentional, whether it was an accident, this man pulled the trigger. He is responsible, period. If somebody paid you a lot of money to do it, if Michael himself paid you a lot of money to do it, it doesn't matter. Bottom line, you did it.
Album is called Angelic to the Core, and one of the people you dedicate it to is Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Now, I cannot recall if you ever took a stand when Michael Jackson was accused of pedophilia. What
I was the
your stand?
first and the only celebrity at the time in 1993 to come out and say absolutely not. Absolutely not. He never touched me. He never touched anybody, as far as I know.
And you still have a positive view of Michael?
I do. But
you don't believe the stories?
No. And what I know is Michael was a gentleman and he was respectful to every child that I saw him with and to me myself. So there was a group of kids and we all formed a bond. We were all friends with Michael. And I asked each one of those kids about their experiences and every one of them told me the same thing that I experienced. You know, come on, this guy loved children. That was his thing. Not like that. Like he loved children. He cared about the children. He wanted the world to be a better place. That's what he spoke for. That's what he stood up for. He loved the magic of it all. So you take somebody like that and let's just think for a second. Let's say that's truly who he is. Let's say there is no other side.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's the whole deal, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you imagine what it must feel like in your soul, if that's your biggest love, your biggest passion, and all they're doing is trying to turn that very thing against you and say that you're the sicko, you're the other side of it. Do you know how you would feel waking up every morning? Michael Jackson was a witch hunt, okay? Let me just say this. As far as I know, and I don't know all the facts because I wasn't in every room. You know, I don't know a lot of things that happened in the years that I wasn't around, but all I can tell you is remarking about the person that I know, the person that was my close friend, that was like a brother to me, he was not that guy. He was a guy who was so innocent, so kind of sheltered, you couldn't even swear around him. You couldn't talk about drugs. You couldn't talk about nude women. You couldn't talk about sex. You couldn't talk about anything. Because he was a very religious man. All we know for a fact is that Jordan Chandler, who was the first kid that accused him, came out after his dad died and wrote an open letter and said that those stories were fake. He said it himself in his own words in an open letter. So we know that. We know that the second trial was negated and was proven to be false. He had 10 counts against him and he was proven innocent on all 10 counts. So why are we even still talking about this? The man's dead. Every time it came up, it was resolved.
Was your relationship with Mike, you know, were you confiding in him about this abuse? Like, was he giving you some words of wisdom on that, or what was that?
No, I was too embarrassed to talk to him. I wouldn't have talked to him about that. That was not even kind of an open forum. You know what I mean? Like, I talked to him about the abuse I endured with kids in school, and I talked to him about the abuse that I endured with my parents, and he talked to me about those things. But no. I wouldn't even talk to, like, you know, my own parents about it. I wouldn't talk to anybody about it. It was a secret until, you know, probably I was sober, like when I was like 21.
Watch it.
I haven't read much, but I know I don't really want to watch it. I have my own reserved feelings about it, but I think that if you're going to do something like that so late in the game after the fact, it makes it very hard to believe when somebody has repeatedly stood up for this person, repeatedly, you know, backed this person, and then even went to them for employment just a few years ago. It's very hard to believe that all of a sudden this entire perspective has changed. It doesn't feel right to me.
After watching the Leaving Neverland documentary, Michael Jackson's friend Corey Feldman weighed in on Twitter. Never touched me inappropriately and never ever suggested we should be lovers in any way. I feel like if people could hear our convos, they would hear the innocence in them. No hint of perversion. I have a tape I'm thinking about releasing, which could give people a real look at what a 30-year-old man-child and a 13-year-old boy would discuss, so everyone could hear the innocence of our relationship. Again, I wasn't there when those boys were.
I was friends with Michael. I don't know anybody from our group of friends that ever saw him in that way. And to hear these sudden reports that just came out of nowhere after a guy literally was handed his life. I mean, you know, he handed him his life, gave him everything. So it feels like a big stab in the...
Yeah, no, I didn't watch any more of it than that. Yeah. But I mean, I don't really want to go into that because it's a sensitive subject and I've covered it. Yeah. But I will just say that I remain in a neutral position on that.
Chuck Feldman initially criticized the film, calling it one-sided, without evidence, saying his friendship with Michael Jackson was never inappropriate. But now the actor's clarifying some of his comments, saying, quote, Michael was my friend, but that does not mean I condone any harmful behavior, physical or mental. This is new information to me. It takes me time to absorb and process.
Well, as I mentioned in my statement, it is obviously a very emotional time for me. And this is a very emotional process for any survivor of abuse, anybody that's been through these things, to, first of all, I ask people to put themselves in my shoes. You know, you're a kid who has endured sexual abuse, and during those times, I'm looking to somebody like Michael Jackson as a friend, as a big brother figure, and he was that person to me. However, as you're friends with this guy, all of a sudden you start to hear more and more accusations being thrown around by various people, and it comes to a point where, as an advocate for victims, as an advocate for changing the statutes of limitations to make sure that victims' voices are heard, it becomes impossible for me to stay virtuous and not at least consider what's being said and not listen to what the victims are saying. This is very important. We must give them their voice. We must allow them to speak. And therefore, we also must consider all sides of this, even as uncomfortable as that may be. You know, as I'm watching it, I'm going, this doesn't make sense to me. This isn't the guy that I knew. But look, I'm a guy that at 14 years old was molested, did have a pedophile completely lie to me about who he was. I trusted him, I believed in him as a friend, and I thought he was a good person, and then he molested me. So it all proves that I'm not the best judge, and that's why I shouldn't be the judge in this situation, and especially given the fact that I'm so close to him. Again, if it was my brother, if it was my own flesh and blood, and all of these horrible accusations were being said against him, I would not be able to judge it. I would have to stand back and go, you know what, I have to look at all sides. And if my brother is guilty of something, then I'm going to condone it and I'm going to go against it. Because what matters most is that we preserve the innocence of children. The children must come first. And we must do God's work in protecting our children on this planet.